seen so many YouTubers talking about Black Lives Matter this summer, with topics like, why is it important? And why do we say Black Lives Matter instead of All Lives Matter?
Yes?
I really wanted to make a video on the topic without sounding like a broken robot.
That's a surprisingly accurate analogy. Since a broken robot is incapable of responding to what's happening in its outside environment, a lot like how Black Lives Matter sycophants are incapable of acknowledging facts that utterly invalidates their culture's existence.
Talking about the exact same thing that everyone else on YouTube has been talking about, and without, of course, overstepping my place as a white person in this conversation.
Okay. Ignoring the fact that you are a pathetic, self-loathing coward who considers black people to be your overlords, what exactly does it mean to overstep your boundaries as a white person? What is the standard for boundaries being overstepped? Who made this standard? What are its parameters? I mean, couldn't it be argued that you're already overstepping your boundaries by continuing to live in a shiny, clean house and use a computer that was all purchased with your parents' money, which, according to people like you, is blood money made on the backs of slaves who existed centuries ago?
So I decided that I wanted to respond to arguments that Black Lives Matter is anti-LGBT.
Well, if we're talking about white LGBT people, then yes, I think it's safe to say that BLM is very much against them.
A lot of people seem to think that Black Lives Matter pushes their activism into spaces where it is neither relevant nor necessary. However, I believe that we can't really have a conversation about LGBT rights without addressing race. And we can't talk about police brutality without talking about LGBT rights.
Okay, people being killed for being black and people being killed for being LGBT are not the same thing. I shouldn't have to explain this.
After all, a 2013 report from the National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs details that 67% of the victims of anti-LGBT homicides are transgender women of color.
If that's true, then why, according to your source, are the most common survivors of LGBT hate crime homosexual men? How can the most common victims be trans women when the most common survivors are gay men? Exactly how much time did you spend researching this?
Tiffany, the Latina woman from the Pulse Vigil video, was invited on stage to read the names of the victims, and was the first one at the event to mention the fact that most of the victims were Latinx. Unfortunately, most people know her from this crappy footage from the vigil, where she was repeatedly interrupted, and the video seems to have been edited. Tiffany started her speech out by saying, "I was really nervous to get up here because there's a lot of white people in the crowd," and went on to say, "I thought I'd just take the moment to just list out some facts that many of you probably don't know because you're white." Although the part where she talks about the facts that she wanted to share seems to have been edited out, or maybe she was just interrupted so she didn't get to say those parts.
Well, you know, when you open a speech saying that people are incapable of understanding something because they're white, those people are naturally going to be pissed off. Most of the time, they will be pissed off to the point of not giving a shit about the rest of what she has to say. And honestly, why should they? Why should anybody who lives today, who exhibits such blatant racism and uses such petty methods of character assassination, be taken seriously?
She also said, "As much as it is awesome that there's so many people here today, it's like, who are you really here for?" Okay, so obviously her speech wasn't worded in the most tasteful, politically correct way.
I fucking love it. My life is complete. I just witnessed a social justice warrior use the word politically correct in the same way that people like me would use it.
But she did what she was asked to do, which is to speak from her heart.
If that's the case, then she's a fucking terrible person.
I totally understand the pressures of being a marginalized person who is pressured to word everything in a way that doesn't upset anyone.
I would certainly fucking hope so, considering that you and people like you are the ones who are trying to make people talk in non-offensive ways.
But the fact of the matter is that marginalized people are people too, and we have emotions and get frustrated.
There's a big difference between being frustrated and being a bigoted piece of shit.
She was obviously angered by and trying to make a point about how most people talking about the Pulse victims ignored the fact that they were largely Latinx.
How fucking bad is your memory? They weren't killed because they were Hispanic. They were killed because they were gay.
But she ended up getting repeatedly interrupted by people who were annoyed by her anger and who ultimately proved her point by saying that the vigil wasn't a racial thing. Ultimately, the conversation should have been both about race and about LGBT issues.
No, it shouldn't have. Nothing about the shooting had anything to do with race. The shooter was a Muslim guy who despised gay people. Why is that so hard for you to comprehend?
The events at the Toronto Pride Parade deal with very similar issues. Black Lives Matter Toronto halted the parade until they had their demands met, which included things like increasing representation among Pride staff while prioritizing Black trans women and Indigenous people, and eliminating police floats at the event. Personally, I don't understand how any of these demands are controversial if you understand the historical and current relationship between the police and LGBT people of color. In the 1960s, LGBT people were especially wary of the police as they could legally raid and arrest people for being in a gay bar.
Yes, they could. Especially if those bars were serving liquor without a license. Once again, you are contradicted by your own sources.
One such law that contributed to this was a regulation in New York that made it illegal to serve alcohol to homosexuals. The tense relationship between LGBT people and the police contributed to the Stonewall Riots of 1969, as did the fact that the police could legally arrest patrons of the bar for reasons such as not wearing enough gender-appropriate clothing.
You are completely wrong. Jesus Christ, are you wrong? The Stonewall Riots were a response to the police raiding and taking down gay bars. That much is true. However, as I said before, most of these bars did not possess a license to distribute and sell liquor of any kind. The reason why is because the National Liquor Association was very condemning and hateful of gay people, so they refused to assign liquor licenses to gay bars. The gay communities became very upset over this, and their angst was eventually noticed by the New York Mafia of all people. The Mafia took advantage of the situation by renovating most of the gay bars in New York and acquiring licenses for said bars by any means necessary. But now, instead of laughing at the idea of giving liquor to gay people, the NLA became extremely peeved at the idea of the gay bars being operated by mobsters, and those exact same mobsters bribing and intimidating their way into selling liquor at all these places. So as a result, police raids of gay bars, especially mafia-owned gay bars, became a shitload more common. Then you have the riots, and the rest is history. In a nutshell, the police were not to blame for the Stonewall Riots. The National Liquor Association was. Check fucking mate.
Today, police raids aren't really an issue, but LGBT plus people of color still face the issue of the police profiling them. In 2012, Mitchell Moore was attacked by police and called a faggot when he was just walking down the street.
It was such a horrible incident that you forgot to provide a citation for it.
Additionally, the police often profile LGBT plus people of color, especially trans women of color, as prostitutes.
So what? Who gives a shit? Why do these people care so much about what the police officers think of them? More importantly, why do they care so much about what asshole police officers think of them? Brilliant way to empower LGBT people. Talk about how terrible it is for other people to judge them all the time.
And use the possession of condoms as evidence to arrest them. Evidence and links and everything to all of this in the description if you want to read up on it.
Translation: read all these articles and pages if you want to see just how full of shit I am.
Given this evidence, I don't think it's unreasonable to request that police not have a float at any pride parade, since the presence of police can make LGBT+ people of color feel unsafe. It's also not unreasonable to expect that LGBT+ people of color be given more representation.
Okay, we're talking about representation now, apparently. Yeah, God forbid this video has any focus.
Sylvia Rivera, a Latina activist and survivor of the Stonewall Riots, warned in 1973 of Pride becoming a middle-class white club. And that's exactly what it's become.
And another citation you forgot to include.
Ultimately, if you think Black Lives Matter is taking away spaces from LGBT people, you should ask yourself why you only want there to be one LGBT narrative, and why you think only white people should have spaces in LGBT communities. People in the LGBT+ community have different experiences based off of how they identify as inside of the community, what their race is, what their economic status is. And talking about these different experiences and issues is actually helping each other and being productive while listening to each other. It's not tearing us down.
Listen to this person, listen to that person. I swear, that is the social justice warriors' answer for everything. Maybe that's why they're so easy to crush in a debate. They spend so much time listening and prostrating themselves to their so-called oppressed masters that they have no weaponry to use against those who disagree with them. That's basically it for this video. It is once again my honor to entertain you all. I will be back again. Fly high and hunt well.